I think the universe saw that I was slacking off and decided to mess with me, because I've tried to record this video at least a dozen times today. And there's been cars going and dogs barking and children, well, one child, specifically mine, so they're in the house with me, but children screaming, and I've got 3 hours to make this video, so is it going to be very good quality? Probably not. Is that on brand for me? Totally is. So let's just roll into the video. But actually, before we get into the video, if you don't know who I am, my name is Helper Wesley. I have made these games, and I make weekly devlogs. So the reason the game was not released originally was because I had a list of little tiny things that needed to get finished, like polish and tweaks and things like that. So I'm just going to speed run through them and tell you what I got done, and then we'll get to the bigger things afterwards. Starting with the blurry lumberjack. All I had to do was go into the file and change smoothing for the character to not exist. I then went in and cut up the edges of the roads from the art pack and put them into the scene, and I did that for the water and the dirt and the grass. People were complaining that you couldn't tell which upgrade you were on when you were on the upgrade, so now there's a tab thingy that shows up when you click on it. So when you click on a tab, the tab, again, you can see it on screen. I also added some text there so that when you go to upgrade something, it tells you what the next upgrade is that you're going to get when you press the button. So you kind of know what upgrade level you're on, plus what you're going to go to. I lightened up the fisherman's particle effect so that it stood out more against the background. Switched the images for the upgrade and the back button because apparently they looked like the opposite. Let's just not look down at the keyboards because there's a button down there that says return on it that has an arrow. Moving on. I made the job for the lumberjack and the miner different by making the miner slower than the lumberjack and then increasing the amount of resources you get from doing the miner's task. So they're the same job, like the same sequence of button presses, but one is faster and one is slower, so hopefully that will make each one feel different than the other. I changed the color of the lumberjack and miner's power bars to make them match the rest of them. Fixed a bug where the upgraded tool didn't actually show up until you clicked on the button. And that officially ends the speedrunning segment of this video. So now I can start talking about the things that took longer, starting with the squash and stretch for the workstations for the villagers. The miner's workstation is a rock, and so all I did for this was 5 frames of a squish down for the initial impact, and then a stretch out a little bit, and then the next frame is a quick pop up while pulling in the sides, and then it bounces back to the original shape. So you can see it on screen now, and this animation is going to get played whenever the miner hits the rock, just to help sell the impact. I did the same thing for the cook's little table, but I made the squash and stretch less noticeable because the cook's hitting faster and not as hard. I remade the town board UI because I wasn't a fan of the way it looked, so instead I decided to use the same transparent black that I've been using for everything else in the game for all the UI menus. And this way it's not a physical thing in the game, but sort of a hub, if you know what I mean. And I think it looks pretty nice. It's far less diegetic, but I feel like it suits the way the game looks. Currently in the game, when you cross over to a new day, it just goes daytime. And that's really sort of sudden and jarring, so I'm putting in a fade transition, just a simple slide one. And I kind of like the way that this worked out because the music goes from the nighttime music to the daytime music during this transition. And that kind of preps the person's head for the fact that now it's daytime, before the fade comes down. I tried fixing the way that the daily needs kind of shows up on screen before you actually get there, but I wasn't entirely sure how to do it. So here's the thing, they're on 2 separate layers, and the camera moves each layer individually. So I'd need to move both cameras relative to each other, and one is zoomed in and one is zoomed out to get the higher resolution for the text. So I decided to just cheat, and it doesn't look great, but my brain just couldn't figure it out. So when the camera gets close, but not quite all the way there, the text pops into screen, and then the scene finishes getting in place. It's not great, but nobody that playtested the game afterwards commented on that. So maybe they're not noticing, and I'm just being nitpicky, or they're being really nice. Something that people really disliked about the game during playtesting was the fact that the resources are decimal points. You don't get a whole resource every time you chop the wood, and this was to avoid the problem of numbers scaling onto fucking infinity, which sounded like a great idea when I started, but now that I'm at this stage, I wish I just let them scale and then round the numbers up, because that would have been simpler than dealing with this issue. So, to make it so that you can actually see the progress you're making by chopping wood, I added a little UI slider bar behind the number. So when you chop and you look up and see that you didn't actually get a full piece of wood, you can see that the bar is starting to increase, and then when you get a whole piece of wood, that bar goes off and starts over again. And this does actually help, I think, because when you get assistance in the game, the way that you get to earn passive resources, when you get assistance, you can actually see the bar going up on its own, whether you're there or not. So I think that actually does help. Is it better than whole numbers? No, it's not. It's really not. But does it work? Kind of. I then wanted to set up a built-in tutorial and do it properly this time. So instead of just having it so that you buy new stations, but you can see all the stations before you buy them, now I have it set up so that you have the lumberjack, and then once you get your first resource with the lumberjack, the button that lets you go back to the town boards shows up, and the only thing that's on the town boards is the merchant and the fisherman. And then as you unlock the fisherman, you get the miner, and then so on. So things are visually not on screen until they're relevant to you. And that should hopefully onboard players smoothly enough that they don't get lost or overwhelmed. And at this point, if you're in my Discord, you might have seen this version of the game already. I turned it into a HTML file and put it up on itch and sent it off for some people to playtest. Then I had to go and do the really, really tedious stuff. I'm gonna crank this up to a high speed during the video. It's really boring to do. I can only imagine how boring it is to watch. Essentially, I'm saving every variable one by one and then putting it into an external file, and then when the game starts up, pulling that back out again, and then putting it to a scene variable, and then putting that scene variable into a global variable so it can be used throughout the game. Then I created some buttons for the option menu, the increase and decrease for the volumes, and a button that lets you reset all data. And this is just the same thing as the save system, but instead of saving numbers, you're just saving zeros. And now that that's done, the game is actually technically done. Playtesters came back with very little feedback, a couple of things here and there. Now that the game is actually done, it was just a matter of taking a bunch of screenshots and creating store icon images and putting the name on the thumbnail for the game. At which point I realized that there were other games that were way too close to Village Clicker on the App Store. I had looked up Village Clicker before starting this project to see if the name was used, and there is nothing that uses the name Village Clicker specifically. But there are a couple of games on there that are real close. So I spent my entire last day trying to figure out what to call the game, and I have no idea what to call it. I've looked up synonyms for forest and things like that, but honestly, this might be where the game ends. But hey, at least the game is finished. I just can't publish it because I don't have a name. So once I find out a name, I will publish the game and I will make a tweet about it, and then I'll get to rake in all that like sweet ad revenue. Anyhow, that's it. That's the end of this series. I might stick some information about the game's release somewhere else in a future video, but this is the last video on this playlist, making it a 4-parter, not a 3-parter, but it's the thought that counts, right? If you enjoyed this video, maybe click on that subscribe button, and if you want to talk to me personally, the link to our Discord is down below. It's called the Game Dev Fireside. It's a pretty chill place to hang out and talk game dev, and if you decide to click on that link, then I'll see you there.